All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our November 22nd Student Achievement Committee meeting. In person right now, we have board members Carter and Kushner, who are also committee members. We're also joined in person by board member Cash. We're joined online by Vice Chair Mahaffey, our attorney Jonathan Bloomberg, and also in person is Superintendent Kathy Moore. So we thank everybody for attending our meeting today. And before we get started, if I could have a motion to approve the October 27th minutes.
Ms. Scott, I move approval of our minutes.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Kushner, a second by Ms. Carter. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. And the motion passes. The minutes for the October 27th meeting are approved. Today we are going to be hearing information about special education services as well as AIG programming. The AIG programming is a follow-up on the conversation that's been taking place for some time, but particularly our last two student achievement meetings. So when we will have that as our second part, but I'm very much excited and looking forward to our presentation today from Special Education Services. So I'm going to have Dr. McFarland sort of give us an overview of what we'll be hearing from their team. Thank you.
So thank you, and good afternoon, Committee Chair Scott, Superintendent Moore, and members of the board that are here today with us. As Ms. Scott did reference, we do have two presentations today, Special Education Services Update and AIG programming. And basically, I just want to set the stage about the two presentations are going to be similar in their format, in that both are going to provide some previous information that may have been shared or that you already know. There's also going to be an overview of current work streams that are going on in the areas. And then there will be information provided about district-wide self-assessment. It's sort of our intentional audit and research work that we're doing, seeking to determine what our strengths are, what our areas that we want to improve might be, but really helping to set the stage and the path forward for the next 3 to 5 years of our work in planning and programming in both AIG and special education services. So I'll just close it. In both cases, this work was being considered, and we were starting some of it prior to COVID. But we believe now is a good time to once again turn our attention back to the work as, we've got a transition happening, coming back to school and leadership. We're also transitioning around a superintendent's leadership plan. And so it's a good time for us to really do a more detailed look at our examination process. And so we want to share that information with you today as kind of an overview as we're closing out both of the presentations. It's important to know that we do plan to come back to student achievement again with, once we have completed our examination, we'll bring a report in both areas back to the board, and we'll share kind of what the report showed and then what some of our next steps will be. Okay, so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jill McKenna, our Assistant Superintendent for Special Education Services, and she will introduce her team, and then they're going to take it away. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. McFarland. Good afternoon, Committee Chair Scott, Superintendent Moore, board members. With me this afternoon are Pam Doak, our Senior Director for Special Education Programming, and Audrey Jones-Langston, our Senior Director for Family and Community Connections and Related Services. Thank you for providing us with an opportunity to share updates from Special Education Services with you today. Our outcomes for today's discussion. During today's meeting, we will share information regarding the current population of students with IEPs, provide an update on back-to-base programming and supports, review services provided in light of our current context, and provide an overview of special education services self-assessment work that will be done in collaboration with district management group and which will guide our future work in special education services. Each year, the district engages in 2 child counts, one in December to determine federal funding and another in April to determine state funding. As you can see, the district's child count has declined over the last 5 years. Between the 2016-2017 and 2019-2020 school years, Wake County Public Schools experienced a steady decline. It is important to note that the district's preschool population included in these counts continued to grow during these school years. The reduction in child count demonstrates a decline solely in the number of students with IEPs in kindergarten through 12th grade. This may be attributed to several factors. While movement of students out of districts and into charter, private, and homeschools impacts this count, this decline can also be attributed to the strong multi-tiered system of support framework within our district and our schools. By strengthening core instruction so that first instruction is best instruction and implementing interventions with fidelity when needed, students experience rigorous learning opportunities designed to support their needs within general education structures, reducing the number of students requiring special education services. The 2020-2021 school year brought a steeper decline in our child counts. The pandemic had a significant impact on timelines related to IEP meetings for annual reviews, reevaluations, and initial eligibility and placement. Regardless of the reason for missed timelines, the district cannot count students whose IEP eligibility is not current. Unlike previous years, the preschool population included in the most recent counts also demonstrated a decline as our preschool programs experienced similar impacts of the pandemic. Additionally, preschool programs were significantly impacted by the closure of our community agencies and partners who commonly refer young children to the district. As we prepare for the December child count this year, special education services staff have compared membership numbers from the beginning of November to those from November 2020. We have seen a slight increase in the membership number over where we were this time last year. When we look further at students with IEPs who are transferring into Wake County Public Schools, we see an increase in the number of students with more complex needs. For several years prior to the pandemic, the number of transfer students following the extended content standards held steady around 150 students over the course of the school year. We saw a dip in this number during the time period of the pandemic, but for this current school year, we have experienced a significant increase in the number of transfer students following the extended content standards. As of early November, 103 students with more complex needs have transferred into Wake County since July. Many of these students have required a smaller staff-to-student ratio to meet their health and safety needs. This often requires additional staff to be assigned to the classrooms, increasing the original staffing allotments. Many of these students also require multiple related services, such as speech language, occupational therapy, physical therapy, feeding therapy, nursing, and special transportation. In addition to services, some students require specialized equipment and supports to meet their unique needs. On this slide, you will see examples of costs associated with some of these specialized equipment, devices, and supports. As I noted earlier, our child count is used to determine federal and state funding. The decrease in child count will impact the funding received. In the past, we have balanced the cost of students who have a greater need for funding with students who have a lesser need. The decrease in child count, combined with the increase in students with more complex needs, challenges this delicate balance of funding. Of note, there is a provision in the budget, in the North Carolina budget, that provides for an independent research organization to make recommendations related to a more balanced approach to funding based on student needs. I'm now going to transition into talking about, more specifically, about programming and services. So the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, requires that services for students be provided in the least restrictive environment based on the student's needs and to the maximum extent possible with their non-disabled peers. IDEA also requires that districts provide a continuum of services to meet individual student needs. As part of this continuum, Wake County provides specialized programs for students who require a more restrictive environment to meet their needs. We often refer to these specialized programs as regional programs. Approximately 5 years ago, Special Education Services began the process of what has become known as back to base or closer to home. Prior to back to base or closer to home, not all regions had sufficient options for regional programs. By increasing the number of schools with regional programs and increasing the number of regional programs in each region, families were provided calendar options as well as the opportunity to participate in school choice options, such as magnet programs. Previously, students would often need to transfer schools when transitioning from second to third grade due to lack of the level 1 and level 2 options. Level 1 is K2, level 2 is 3-5. Now, students frequently have the opportunity to attend the same school for kindergarten through 5th grade. These increased opportunities for students to attend their base school has reduced travel times for the majority of students and afforded the opportunity to attend school with their siblings and community friends. For our middle and high school students, this has also allowed them to receive community-based instruction in the community where the student lives. Overall, back to base and closer to home has allowed for increased opportunities for parent, school, and community engagement. The number of programs and needs varies from year to year. Currently, at the elementary school level, back to base and closer to home impacted 6 programs. The cross-categorical kindergarten, or CCK, and emotional behavior support kindergarten, or EBSK, are specialized programs for students transitioning from pre-K to kindergarten who require additional structures and supports during the transition to kindergarten. Currently, CCK programs are available in 8 of our 9 regions. Both traditional and year-round options are available in 3 of these regions. The EBSK program is available in 6 regions. Our elementary behavior support program is available in all 9 regions, while the more specialized emotional behavior support autism program is currently in 3 of the 9 regions. Both the EBS and EBS-AU programs have traditional and year-round calendar options across the regions. All regions have an extended content standards, or ECS classroom, at both the level 1, which is, again, kindergarten through 2nd grade, and level 2, 3rd through 5th grade. Some students require a more specialized extended content standards program. These specialized ECS classrooms serve students with more complex needs, such as students who are medically fragile or who have significant physical, self-help, and/or social-emotional needs. Currently, specialized extended content standards programs for elementary schools are available in 6 regions. There is a typo on your slide. We went back and recounted, so that should be 6. At the secondary level, back to base and closer to home impacted 3 distinct programs. Students who receive services in an emotional behavior support program or the emotional behavior support autism program at the elementary level generally transition to the base school and receive services through an autism support or behavior support teacher. These services are provided in most middle and high schools. Should we have students who require this support and transition to a school that does not currently have an autism support teacher or a behavior support teacher, special education services staff collaborates with the school staff to determine how to meet the student's needs with existing resources, or if necessary, allot additional staff to meet the need. The remaining two programs, impacted programs, are for students who are following the extended content standards. Extended content standards classrooms are available in most high schools and all but 3 of our middle schools. The schools without an extended content standards program lack the space and necessary facilities to open an ECS classroom. Similar to the elementary level, specialized ECS classrooms to serve students with more complex needs are offered at the secondary level. These specialized programs are available in, again, there's a typo, I apologize for that. For the middle school, it should be 6 regions, and then 7 regions for our high schools. Special Education Services is committed to continuing the work of returning students back to base or closer to home. Beginning in late fall and early winter, Special Education Services collaborates with the Office of Student Assignment to ensure understanding of the district student assignment process, including any updates or changes for the coming school year. Special Education Services also pulls student assignment data on all current regional program students, including their current assignment and their base school assignment for the following school year. This data is especially helpful for determining the possible need for additional programs for the coming school year for students transitioning from elementary to middle and middle to high. From there, Special Education Services staff begins to develop preliminary class rosters with current and possible needed programs, which informs business cases and allotment needs for the coming school year. Moving into late winter and early spring, Special Education Services collaborates with all regional program teachers and the Office of Early Learning to continue gathering data on recommendations from IEP teams on regional programs and services for the next school year. This continues to inform program needs for the next school year, including the need for additional programs and movement of programs based on student needs and regions. During this time, we also collaborate with student assignment regarding parent requests to determine the availability of services within specific schools at all levels. This includes calendar options, magnet requests, and transfers. The final stages of the assignment process for the spring and into the summer includes building regional program rosters, allotting staff to include teachers, instructional assistants, interpreters, braillists, and nurses, just to name a few. There are a lot more positions that are allotted, and informing school administrators of any changes or additions to programs at their school. Throughout this process, Special Education Services continues to collaborate with the Office of Student Assignment and adjust class rosters and staffing in response to changes as students transfer in or out of the district or move to other regions within the district. In addition to collaborating with student assignment, Special Education Services works with facilities on the development and maintenance of a 5 to 7 year plan. Using data, staff across these departments analyze yearly projections to identify new regional programs, repurpose facilities where programs are no longer needed, upgrade facilities based on student needs, and design classrooms based on program and student needs, which may include modifications to restrooms, kitchens, and playgrounds. The transition of students back to base or closer to home has also required the close collaboration of the Office of Early Learning and Special Education Services. Planning for the transition of students from pre-K to kindergarten begins in the late fall. Staff in the Office of Early Learning and staff in Special Education Services hold frequent meetings to review students transitioning to kindergarten and their specific needs. These collaborative efforts have included professional learning for pre-K teachers regarding the transition process, informational sessions for parents of students transitioning from pre-K to kindergarten, observations of pre-K students prior to transitioning, and support at IEP meetings. The outcomes of pre-K transition IEP meetings are continuously monitored to ensure timely adjustments to class rosters, staffing allotments, and regional programs when needed. With the increase in regional programs across schools and regions, Special Education Services has recognized the need for professional learning for teachers and classroom staff. In addition to providing direct services to students, related service and assistive technology staff routinely provide training for staff and families on strategies, equipment, devices, and environmental modifications for individual students. Similarly, instructional programming and behavior support team staff provide modeling, coaching, and collaborative problem solving around individual and small groups of students. But more broadly, we have provided opportunities for professional learning that impact larger groups of students through professional development around inclusive practices and co-teaching. These opportunities target general education and special education teams within schools to provide support for student needs across settings. This remains an ongoing effort supported by our inclusive practices and professional learning team in collaboration with Special Education Services instructional and behavior support teams. As you can see, the transition and ongoing support and success of Back to Base and Closer to Home has truly been a cross-departmental collaboration. As you know, students with IEPs receive services that are individualized to their unique needs. For all students with IEPs, this includes direct services. Some students also receive extended school year or ESY services as part of their IEP. Additionally, some students may also receive or have received recovery services or compensatory services. We're going to briefly explain each of these. All students with IEPs receive direct services, regardless of whether they are attending school in person or enrolled in virtual academy. The vast majority of students with IEPs are attending school in person and receive special education and related services on site at the school. For these students, the supports and services are driven by the IEP. A smaller number, just under 1,200 students with IEPs, are enrolled in the district's virtual academy. Students in virtual academy receive their special education services through online formats. This includes related services which are provided through teletherapy. For many virtual academy students, the IEP can be implemented in the online instructional environment, and the services and supports indicated on the IEP are provided. However, for some students, the IEP cannot be implemented as written because of the difference in structure of virtual academy as compared to in-person learning. When this is the case, the IEP team has discussions about the supports and services that are required and appropriate within the context of virtual academy. These supports and services are then documented on the online instruction service and support plan. Within the IEP process, teams determine whether a student requires extended school year or ESY services. There are several factors that the team considers in making this determination. First, IEP teams consider whether the student regresses or may regress during extended breaks and cannot relearn lost skills within a reasonable time frame. Second, IEP teams consider whether the benefits the student gained during the school year will be significantly jeopardized if the student is not provided an educational program during the break. Finally, teams consider whether the student is demonstrating emerging skill acquisition that will be lost. This last factor is often referred to as the window of opportunity. We'll miss that window of opportunity if they're not provided with a program during breaks. Again, these factors are considered annually as part of normal IEP processes. As you will notice in the chart, the number of students determined eligible for extended school year services was steadily increasing prior to the pandemic. During the pandemic, it became more difficult to tease out regression related to breaks from lost opportunities to learn skills, as well as defining what a reasonable time frame for such an unprecedented circumstance meant that impacted all students. So this leads us to recovery services. Recovery services are services that the district offered to students to recoup lost learning opportunities related to the pandemic. Many students with IEPs were offered the opportunity to participate in district summer learning programs. Within summer learning, students experience varying levels of recovery services related specifically to their IEP goals. Generally, students following the extended content standards had more opportunity to receive recovery services within their summer program. Students following the standard course of study who participated in summer learning first engaged in learning opportunities related to the general curriculum and may have had recovery services to address IEP goals when there was sufficient time to layer on the additional services. During the 2021-22 school year, instruction and supports for students continues to be scaffolded to address gaps in instruction related to school closures. As an example, following the pandemic, our extended content standards team developed bridge documents that reflected curriculum standards and skills that were missed during the time of school closures. These were prioritized and embedded within instruction once students returned. This concept of scaffolding to build connections and more deeply address missed standards continues into this school year. For many students, the opportunity to participate in summer learning, combined with scaffolded support during the school year, has proven sufficient to recoup lost opportunities for learning. Any future recovery service opportunities will be based on individual student needs. Outside of the typical services that students receive and the recovery services that have been offered, some students are also entitled to compensatory services. Compensatory services are provided when the district has failed to meet an obligation. This may be due to a missed timeline or missed services. We have seen an increase in the amount of compensatory services owed to students over the last year. Specifically, this has been related to three factors. First, evaluations during the pandemic were delayed until health and safety protocols were in place. This created a backlog of evaluations that took a while to clear. When this created a delay in determining eligibility and providing services to a student, the student was offered compensatory services to make up for the delay in services. Additionally, we have some students who have missed services due to staffing vacancies. When a teacher is not in place, most students are able to receive services through a sub. However, when the vacancy is in a related service area, such as speech or occupational therapy, a substitute teacher is not an appropriate solution for the vacancy. In these instances, compensatory services are offered to make up for missed services. The last area that has led to an increase in compensatory services is related to students participating in North Carolina virtual public school courses through our virtual academy. Because NCVPS courses are asynchronous online courses, students who typically receive in-class resource services within the general education classroom were unable to receive this service. IEP teams have held meetings to discuss services and supports to meet the students' needs in light of this shift to NCVPS courses. However, for most, if not all students, services were missed from the time of course enrollment until the IEP meeting to discuss and determine new ways of providing special education. Students impacted by this have or will be offered compensatory services. So now that we know our current context, let's take a look at the exciting work that's ahead of us in special education services. In October, the board approved a contract with District Management Group to engage in a self-assessment project with special education services. This project has two main goals. First, to identify potential improvements to the district's processes so that we more effectively address common issues and concerns related to special education. Second, to identify recommendations to highlight and showcase the district's special education programs and services. Activities related to this project begin in December with an anticipated conclusion in June 2022. Related to the first goal, there are three key activities I want to highlight. Special education services will provide data regarding both formal and informal concerns and complaints, and the processes used to respond to concerns to District Management Group. This data will be analyzed to identify common issues. District Management Group will also conduct focus groups with stakeholders to include school-based staff, central-based staff, parents, and community partners. Through the focus groups, stakeholders will provide input and perspective on challenges and help inform recommendations. Using all of the information gathered, District Management Group will identify areas in which the current processes can be improved. The anticipated outcome of these activities is the development of a practical, cost-effective plan to effectively resolve concerns. Related to the second goal, there are 4 key activities that focus more closely on regional programs. This work stream begins with a review of the current specialized programs within the district. Again, District Management Group will conduct focus groups with stakeholders to include school-based staff, central-based staff, parents, and community partners. Some stakeholders might participate in both focus groups. From there, District Management Group will identify areas of improvement for programs, as well as review the structures of programs and propose refinements. While we want to use this opportunity to highlight and showcase current programs, Special Education Services will also use the information gathered from this work stream to prioritize improvements to special education services and programs. To help guide the work and review findings, a project steering committee comprised of district stakeholders will meet monthly with District Management Group staff. Recommendations for both work streams will be available by June 2022. We plan to bring those recommendations back to the Board of Education when they are available. Special Education Services leadership will consider the recommendations as we develop the department strategic plan for the 2022-23 school year and beyond. So thank you for your time and attention to our Special Education Services updates this afternoon, and we are happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. McKenna. And I also think this is your first presentation with the board, so welcome. I apologize for not saying that earlier. Thank you very much. And a very thorough presentation at that. Our special education, for those of us who, it's very personal. For those of us who've either worked in special education or have loved ones who are impacted with IEPs and special education, it's very personal, and there's a lot of heart, there's a lot of passion from both parents and the people the professionals who work with our students. So I appreciate all of that. Before we get into our,
I just want to make a quick comment
Yes.
before the questions. I think I just want to highlight the work around having a group come in and review the work that we're already doing, the concerns and focus groups, and sort of develop an action plan coming out of that. We have a number of transitions going on, trying to come out of this pandemic mode that we've been in and truly understand how we can come out of it better and stronger. The highlight on some of the gaps that existed pre-pandemic that were highlighted by the pandemic, and how we come out of that stronger. Transition in leadership that we have at this point in time as well. I think there's a real opportunity in that work. And so contracting with someone to come in and take a look, a third party from the outside, and see what's happening, that can see what's happening in other districts, what's happening in districts, what our numbers are showing, really does provide an opportunity to move forward. And so just wanted to highlight that piece for the board.
and I appreciate you doing so, Superintendent Moore. I had read a tweet, which I'm going to paraphrase terribly, but the point of the tweet was, how many educators, the silver lining to the pandemic was we're going to come out of this and we're going to make the changes that we've needed to make. And then, of course, as it goes on and on and on, it kind of knocks the wind out of you that maybe that's not happening. And I appreciate you highlighting that we're doing just that with this, and this mentioning that is, I think, important for people to hear and understand that we do recognize that, and we're certainly moving forward in that way. Before I turn it over to my colleagues for questions and comments, I did want to point out that Monica Johnson-Hassler joined us virtually as well, as did Dr. Martin from Germany. So welcome to the two of them. And I will go ahead and turn it over. I have some questions, but I'll turn it over to my colleagues if they have any. Ms. Carter.
Well, I just share my appreciation for this because I think it's very helpful, especially if some folks really, the breakdown at the beginning of all the information, I think will be helpful for some in our community who've had a lot of questions. But I just really had a few questions, but I'll just start with one and see, pass it on. But the focus group that was mentioned, do you know if they are considering having any students involved? Because I was trying to take notes, I didn't hear that, and I don't know if that's open for that or.
That has not been part of the discussion to this point, but if that is something that you would like for us to explore with them, we're more than happy to ask DMG to also include a focus group for students as well. It's a great suggestion.
Just coming from special ed, I know a lot of them, they're receiving the services. So I think it, to me, could be an important piece of information to have because they're impacted directly by the decisions.
Great suggestion, yeah. The
Absolutely.
students are the center of
Yeah.
our why.
Yeah, okay.
Absolutely. I will take that back to, I have weekly meetings with them, so I will take that back to my next meeting with them.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Ms. Kushner?
Thank you, Ms. Scott, and thank you, Ms. McKenna, and welcome again. I agree with the superintendent. This is a perfect time for us and with your staff and this transition, both with coming out of the pandemic and leadership. I think it's a great idea to bring an outside team. So thank you for bringing this summary to us. And I'm trying to just get a better sense of. One quick question, have the backlogs of, because we did hear about IEPs during the pandemic and how difficult it was for both staff and students and families to connect. Has that backlog been cleared since the start of the school year?
The backlog of evaluations for our related service providers has been cleared for a couple of months now, correct, Audrey? Yes. My understanding is that the backlog around the psychological and educational evaluations should be cleared within the month.
Okay. It's a lot. I know it's been a lot to catch up on, and going forward, hopefully, we'll smooth that out for our community. And can you tell us a bit about the use and the future of teletherapy? That's technology throughout this pandemic was seen as a solvent for all things, but I also know that in person has also been so necessary for the vast majority of our students. So what's the future of the use of teletherapy.
Sure. So Ms. Jones-Langston and her team have put a lot of work into teletherapy, so I'm going to let her take this one.
Thank you. Thank you for being here today, Ms.
Thank you
Jones-Langston.
for having us here today as well. Teletherapy has been an awesome journey. It truly has. It has worked for several of our families, especially during the pandemic because we couldn't provide those face-to-face services. And we've continued that with our students that are receiving services through the virtual academy. But teletherapy has really expanded the knowledge of our team as far as providing more individualized services and supports for our students, using different types of supplementary materials and programs, really connecting with families because they are the e-helpers for their students. It could be anyone that they've hired or it could be themselves. So that's really giving them an opportunity to really dig deep into the work that we are doing to provide those services for our students that are receiving related services. It's been a very positive experience for our OTs as well. They provided a site to support families, provide a site for new occupational therapists that come on board where they can just jump in and provide those services because the lessons have already been developed. Parents are giving detailed instruction. Even parents that are non-English speaking also have joined because we're using our interpreters to provide those services and to supports to the families. Now, it hasn't worked for all families, of course. For some students, it's not appropriate for them because of their level of understanding, and we're working closely with those families to make sure that we're able to provide really unique and individualized services for them for teletherapy.
I think it's a great opportunity going forward with this analysis to see where can any more online or virtual services augment what y'all are already doing and streamline some of the work so that students can have the best of both worlds. So I
Yes,
think
absolutely.
it's a both-and opportunity going forward.
Yes.
Thank you for that. And I think we, as a board, need to get a better understanding of some of the child count, sort of the changes in transfer students moving in. Where are they transferring in from?
All over.
Okay.
So we do have some that are coming from within state, some from out of state. We have seen an uptick in the number of students transferring from other countries who had not, who are coming to us who had not had services in place or really even some basic supports. Ms. Jones-Langston's team also works to help kind of process through and get all of that set up for students as well, too. So we have a lot of students who are coming in who might need a wheelchair and haven't had a wheelchair. A lot from out of country.
I'm sure for every student, there's a different assortment of needs that we have to meet. So thank you for so all of the above, I guess, is what. Thank you. That's it. Ms. Scott, thank you for.
I just have a few questions as well, just for sake of understanding. When we're looking at the recovery services that were mentioned, the extended school year, is that offered primarily to K through 5 students, or is that, and just sort of the difference between that and credit recovery, like what sort of, I assume credit recovery doesn't not necessarily apply to IEPs, students with IEPs, but could you just give sort of a general definition of the differences between that and which students and grade levels might be impacted?
Sure. So I want to start by clarifying that our students with IEPs are able to participate in credit recovery, just like their general education counterparts, if that's appropriate for them. When we're talking about extended school year services, we're talking about services specifically related to the child's IEP goals. And it's an annual determination. There is not a set grade level or category of eligibility. So we have students who are in preschool who receive extended school year services. We have some of our students who are seniors who are receiving extended school year services. So we see across the board. We've got students who are on extended content standards who receive extended school year services. And we have students who are standard course of study students who receive them. So it's very broad sweeping and very individualized based on the student's IEP goals.
Thank you. I appreciate that because there are, in education, there are a lot of acronyms and a lot of terms that can be confusing, even though I maybe should already know the answers to some of those, but I think it helps to have those clarified. Thanks for that. And I think with the back to base, some of the concerns that I heard at the very beginning of that from teachers was just feedback about being concerned. It is the skill set that I've been practicing for many years going to apply over into a classroom with more diverse needs. And I have not had the opportunity to follow up with that. So these were concerns prior, and I'm sure that those were expressed within the district. And I was just curious along the lines of the back to base feedback you've received from teachers on how that actually has been going.
Right, so the structures and the systems that are part of good teaching for students with IEPs apply to students across a variety of disability categories. I understand that there was a lot of concern when there was a transition from ID moderate and AU classrooms into ECS classrooms. I think generally what we found, and Pam, I'll let you speak to this as well, what we found is good instruction is good instruction, and those supports and services that worked for students who were in an AU classroom previously work for students who are in an extended content standards, that all students are benefiting from those, the skill set of the teacher in that instance.
In addition, we still have students who have very unique needs, right? And so our teams are very aware of those situations. As Jill pointed out, we have specialized programs within our regions that are needed for some of our students who even need a smaller staff to student ratio and those kinds of supports. And we also provided a lot of professional learning around those structures that we've talked about, and provided teachers direct support with those, as well as providing them opportunities to see other teachers' classrooms and those kinds of things, so that we can make sure we're building the skills for all teachers and all the students' needs are being met in those classrooms.
Thank you. I appreciate that feedback. And then I see that Ms. Johnson-Hassler has a question, but really quick, especially since Dr. Martin's on the call, I think I'd love to know a little bit more at some point about the facilities issues with some schools, that there may not be enough space to have certain programs, and if any of that is just because of the growth in the school, or is it just the year the school was built? Was it prior to those space standards, and whether or not our new schools are keeping whatever these unique situations are in mind if it's appropriate to consider those when we're looking at our new construction.
I think I can address that very quickly. We do work very closely with facilities, particularly around both new construction or if there's been renovations. And so we go in and work with them and talk about what kind of spaces are needed. So your question was, of the schools who don't have those programs right now, there are older schools, so don't necessarily have those facilities. But as renovations are coming about, then we work with facilities and really look at what are those needs. We look at what are the needs within that region, and that's taken into consideration when the plans are developed for those schools. So really, just to have 3 middle schools not to have a program, actually, one of those middle schools has 2 specialized programs, so there's not room for another program. So sometimes it's space also, right? As you all know, some of our schools get capped for lots of different reasons, and you all know that probably much better than I do in regards to that. So we have to look at all of those factors when we're making those decisions, and we work closely around that 5 to 7 year plan and see who's being renovated, what's being built. We go in and help work with the plans, and Audrey's team also with related services, the needs, the physical needs of students and those kinds of things. So we're always addressing that. And in addition to that, we may have a unique need we've never had before. And if a student's in a school that can't meet that need, then we've gone in and just renovated around that and been able to meet the needs that way too. So it's really different depending on the needs, but we're always looking at that and making those considerations.
Thank you for that.
A very appropriate point to raise. I'll note that that's also why we, or one of the components behind the reevaluation of facilities utilization report, because we did have some schools that had, particularly crowded schools, that had used spaces otherwise to be dedicated for special needs for capacity. And so with the new facilities utilization process, I think we're going to make sure that the special education needs are taken care of more locally. So existing schools are going to be in the consideration, not just the planning for new facilities.
Thank you for that, Dr. Martin. And it sounds like it is going very well, but it's absolutely something we always want to make sure that we monitor. It looks like Ms. Johnson-Hostler's hand went down, but I will absolutely open it up to her if she has questions. Ms. Cash?
Thank you, Ms. Scott. You actually did ask my question, which was the list of options under back to base. So it's been answered. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, just a quick question on that, since that was brought up about facilities. So if a school, how often do you review where the regional programs are placed? Because I think sometimes they're in a CAP school and there may be empty seats in a school right next to that school. And I always worry about kids being capped out, because usually they're the higher free and reduced lunch children that are capped out of our schools and then have to come back later. Do you review where you place the regional programs on a regular basis? There may be a school that has room for a regional program right next door to a CAP school?
We do. We review that all the time, at least yearly, if not more than that, depending on what's happening during that particular school year. But knowing that we already have many programs in schools, even the school next door, they may not have room for another program. But particularly at the elementary level or middle and high school, if students have more significant needs, we're always looking to make sure that the program, if it's not in their base school, the program they're assigned to is as close to their base school and home as we possibly can be. That's why we wanted to have more opportunities in each of the regions. Previously, before we started Back to Base, we gathered some data to look at that. In one high school, we had students moving to 9 different high schools. Now, those students don't move to any high schools unless they have very specialized needs. They stay within their base school. At the elementary level, there's more schools, so we're doing that within the region. But we're looking at that constantly. Most of our ECS programs are there and are needed and are going to stay, but our very specialized programs, for instance, for students who have hearing impairments or visual impairments, we may not need that program forever. So if we're not needing that program, then we look to repurpose that space in that program to meet the needs within that region. So it's at least yearly, if not more often. Now, we can't make changes during the year, but we're always looking at that and adjusting our 5-year plan to make sure that we're addressing those.
And so you might move a regional program from one school to another?
If there's a need, or meaning if there's some students in that region that no longer need that program, that's a possibility. That's a rarity, but it's a possibility in regards to that.
Okay, I guess I was just wondering if there was a regional program in one school that was capped, but there was a school that had empty seats right next door. You wouldn't repurpose that regional program to the other school?
We may use that space for a plan for the future of using that space. We may not have staff or be able to use that space immediately, but we're always looking at, that's why we have the plan and do that with facilities. They're always letting us know where those opportunities are. And in addition to that, if we find more needs in a region based on the data we gather every year, then we start building those in long range so that we can make sure we have those needs met.
And my only other question will be, I had a couple more, but I'll just go to one. And if we are having children transferring into our district, where is our, when we meet their needs when we get them, so we're responsible for that point forward with their IEP, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Thank you so much to my colleagues. Dr. Martin, did you have an additional question?
Yes, I did, and I apologize that I arrived late, and so it may have been covered, but I really appreciate the carrying out the self-assessment. I think that's a really important thing to do periodically. But with respect to that, and several of us board members talk, as we deal with a lot of lawsuits related to services provided or claims not provided. And it sometimes gets frustrating because it feels like, there's a lot of just I's dotted and T's crossed that end up, becoming problematic down the road. So I guess my question is, in this self-assessment, is there a plan to look at a bunch of the past legal cases to see what can be learned? How can we better prevent, some of these legal cases from popping their heads up down the road? It seems like some are avoidable and some are not avoidable. But if we could minimize the avoidable ones, that would obviously be best.
Yes. So part of the first work stream is to look at any of the issues, complaints, concerns that have come forward, both through those formal processes like lawsuits and state complaints, as well as informal concerns that are brought to us. Analyzing those for common issues or trends that we're seeing so that we can then develop a plan to resolve them, not just on the back end, but how we can proactively put some things in place to decrease the likelihood of lawsuits and state complaints.
Thank you. That's very important. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for that question, Dr. Martin. And I want to just extend, again, my gratitude for this presentation today to Ms. McKenna, Ms. Stoke, and Ms. Jones-Langston. We appreciate all of the work that you do. These are great questions from our colleagues, and as we hear, this is ongoing work. Ms. Carter, did you have a? Sure.
I'm sorry. That was one of my ones. I wanted to circle back. I know with the instructional assistants, and they've had an increase of several work days now. And I was wondering if there's been an increase in training for them, availability in the special ed, because I know often that can be a concern, and oftentimes I know teachers, they're required and they have a lot more. And I was just wondering, I know in other areas there's been an increase. Has that been addressed as well with their additional days as well now?
It has. We've worked closely with the Office of Professional Learning. Some of the trainings and professional development that we do with teachers, we've opened those up to instructional assistants also. And then we've also developed some specific training for instructional assistants. Those are, we're still working and growing those, but we have and had a lot of instructional assistants take us up on some of those trainings also. So we're excited about that.
Thank you. And actually, Ms. Carter, that made me think of a question that I meant to ask earlier. In our state budget, I know that our finance team is still going through and looking at all of the details. Is there an increase? Have they lifted that cap for funding from the state level for special education services, and any additional allotments for instructional assistance for special education, or has there been an impact in that way?
So the pieces specifically related to special education do include an increase in per child funding to $4,600 per child, and increasing the cap from 12.75 to 13% of ADM, or our actual number of students identified within the district. We are just under that 13%, so that 13% is not going to have the impact on us, but the 4,600 will increase our funding, our state funding, some as well. And then there is the independent research organization piece in there as well, to look at a more balanced funding formula that would consider student needs and the severity of needs as compared to a flat funding rate. That one, there will be a little bit longer before we would see anything from that, but it does lay out that the recommendations from the organization would come in March. So more to come on that.
Thank you. That's
I actually have a question. Have we run the numbers yet to understand whether the $4,600 increase actually covers increase for additional positions, or if it's covering the benefits and other pieces associated with the raises that come?
I have not. We certainly can run those numbers.
In the
I
past,
would
yeah.
imagine that
Yeah.
it just covers the raises. It's about $600 per child
Yeah,
more
in the
than
past,
what it currently
when
is.
those increases have occurred, they've not always actually been able to be leveraged for additional positions because of other increased costs or raises or things that come across. So probably need to run those and see.
Thank you for that.
Ms. Scott, I'm
Sure.
sorry. And it's a follow-up on the March 2022, you said there's a group that will be looking at severity of student needs. So
With-
is that, what group is that? And is
It's,
that-
well, within
the state level.
within the state budget, there are some qualifications around the research organization. To my knowledge, it has not been selected at this point.
It's a plan at the
But
state
that is
level.
coming at the state level with those
Okay.
recommendations that would go before General Assembly and Appropriations
Oh, thank
Committees
you.
at that level.
Thank you.
And just to highlight that as well, I think what's important about that work is a discussion we've had several times at this table around the fact that while the appropriation per student is static regardless of need of the student, the cost of serving students varies greatly from those who have, a few minutes of CCR or consultation per week to those with the highest needs and one-on-ones and smaller group settings and those types of things. So being able to do some work to actually determine what the cost of serving different students is and maybe have a funding model that more equitably represents what's needed by the student is something this district welcomes.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you again so much for this presentation. We look forward to the follow-up discussions throughout. But at this point, we'll go ahead and transition over to our AIG portion of the presentation. Thank you again very much. All right, and as we are transitioning over to our AIG information, I just want to remind my colleagues again, there's a lot of follow-up and from the previous times that we have heard, and a lot of great things in this presentation, so I look forward to it. So, Mr. Cook, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Ms. Scott, and good afternoon, everyone. Superintendent Moore, members of the board. So as Ms. Scott and earlier Dr. McFarland referenced, this is actually the third time we've brought this topic to you in a series of updates since, I believe, May of this year, and we actually plan to come back again probably early in the spring as well. And so in continuing that conversation today, we wanted to provide you an update really around the ongoing and planned work related to AIG programming, but kind of continuing the theme with special education services, today primarily focused on kind of the evaluation process in the name of continuous improvement. And so we'll talk and focus much of our attention today on that work. So to that end, and I know we'll get the presentation up maybe just in just a moment, but to that end, we've got three key areas and desired outcomes that we'll focus on this afternoon. First, a follow-up review, as we mentioned, from the May and June Student Achievement Committee meetings on this subject. Also, we'll provide information regarding opportunities for growth and change. And also, we'll close with kind of a look at future ideas and priority areas of focus, many of which will be driven by some of the evaluations and kind of self-assessment efforts that will be ongoing in the coming months. So just a little bit more in terms of the presentation itself. Here on slide 3, you see just kind of an overview outline. Again, the May 2021 and June 2021 Student Achievement Committee presentations are linked in there, and actually somehow I got them juxtaposed, so you may have already discovered that May is June's presentation and June is May's presentation. It's all the same information. Apologies for getting those backwards. So we'll spend just a quick few minutes recapping what we've shared, presented, and discussed going back a few months ago. And then we'll start to dive in a little bit more in terms of growth and change, specifically around some of the formative and early findings from our data research and accountability team that has been shared initially with our intervention and advanced learning services team. And then also we'll begin to share more information about a recent partnership that we've initiated with the Hanover Research Group. They'll be working with us in a similar fashion probably to what's Special Education Services is doing with an external entity, really to provide us a comprehensive evaluation of our AIG programming, but most specifically, at least initially, around stakeholder perceptions, including parents, teachers, administrators, staff members, community members, board members, in terms of what our collective perceptions of AIG programming means in Wake County. And then, importantly, they'll also be working with us to assist in providing some benchmarking data in terms of what other peer districts and exemplary districts across the state and region are doing around AIG programming. So obviously, we can work to identify best practices and to see where there's opportunities for us to implement some of those practices further in the Wake County Public School System. And then we'll close, again, with kind of an overview. Believe it or not, it's already time to begin work around the 2022-2025 iteration of the state AIG plan. It seems like just yesterday we were here in front of you talking about the current plan that's been in place now. This is year 3. And so Lakeisha will share a little bit more about that. And then we'll also just close with a brief kind of overview of potential work that we may do in the future around allotments and business cases, again, based potentially on the findings and what we learn with some of the evaluation work that we do over the next 6 months or so. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lakeisha and also Megan from Data Research and Accountability to take us through the core of the presentation this afternoon.
Thank you, Drew. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you again for allowing us time to speak with you again. Before we get started, as Drew mentioned, I would like to take a few moments to just highlight some of the things that were presented on our May and our June SAC meeting this year. So in May, we addressed 3 areas: our COVID response, how the county is working to address disproportionality, and then some of our future opportunities at the time. We discussed the vital role of the AIG teacher in serving gifted students. Then we discussed the use of portfolio process. So for us, the portfolio process is a way for a school team to analyze multiple data points to assist in determining whether or not a student needs differentiation beyond our core curriculum. This process required school teams to analyze work samples, rating scales, and other data points to help in making decisions about referrals and placement in the AIG programming. We were also able to highlight the great work of 2 of our schools, which was Millbrook Elementary and Wakefield Elementary, who shared how their schools used the team approach to aid in nominating and identifying students. And our preliminary data then showed a very promising increase in our underrepresented populations. We then discussed our participation in the Talent Unleashed grant. The Talent Unleashed grant, as we mentioned before, is a grant funded by Z. Smith Reynolds, founded to take a systemic approach to closing the excellence gap. And we also discussed the state's call to action, which was the Division of Advanced Learning and Gifted Education. DPI launched this multi-year strategic initiative called the 6 Critical Actions to Realizing Equity and Excellence in Gifted Education. The work around this initiative started in 2019 when the division researched the work in counties across North Carolina in gifted education and looked at what attributes must the school system employ to have an equitable system for giftedness. We aligned our talent develop efforts with the work of the Talent Unleashed grant and DPI's call to actions to produce a strength-based learning opportunities where teachers can observe and collect data for the purpose of gifted identification. The final part of the presentation on that day focused on how we would screen all our third and fourth grade students to ensure we were able to identify any student who may have been missed during the use of our portfolio process. And lastly, we discussed our transition planning, which was a collaborative effort with us and student support services for students transitioning from elementary to middle school and from middle school to high school to learn about acceleration opportunities. So since this meeting, we have made the portfolio process a permanent fixture in our identification process, which no longer relies on one data point, but encourages teams to look at multiple data points to determine a student's gift and what areas to target the development of those gifts. At this point, we have offered universal screening for all third and fourth grade students, whether they're attending virtually or not, as well as the transition meetings that consisted of counselors and AIG teachers. The District Talent Unleashed team has participated in 2 Talent Unleashed sessions, each session offering expert guidance around achieving equity in our AIG program. In June, we shared information about AIG programming services as well as areas of focus. In this presentation, we shared how students are served at the elementary, middle, and high school levels. We shared the resources provided to AIG teachers to complement the core curriculum, and we had the opportunity to hear from Lizzie Casey, an AIG teacher from North Woods, who shared how she serves her gifted students and how she adapts the curriculum to meet the needs of her students using the resources and student interest. In the future area focus, we discussed the work we would be doing around helping AIG teachers develop level 4 opportunities for students, as well as how to look at data and how to plan lessons that foster the use of critical thinking, as well as how to support new teachers in the AIG role. Since our time together, we have initiated a PL series for AIG teachers, focusing on best practices for designing curriculum for the gifted and looking at depth complexity in Sandra Kaplan's Icons with Dr. Stevens, the Associate Professor and Practice Program in Education from Duke University. The Advanced Learning Department has also hosted bi-weekly office hours for AIG teachers, as well as one-on-one support for all our K-8 schools with a focus on the school's individual AIG program. These visits will continue throughout the year. The Advanced Learning team has also conducted several professional learnings, such as Data Take the Wheel, helping teachers look at data to inform instructional programming, as well as Beyond Not More, which is one in a series of PLs helping teachers to create rigorous learning experiences that align to standards, but encouraging them to go deeper into the content level of synthesizing instead of just adding more. So now we will hear from Dr. Megan Scrimger from Data and Research Accountability. She will provide some information on the ongoing collaboration between Intervention and Advanced Learning Services and Data Research and Accountability and the evaluation of the current AIG 3-year plan.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Committee Chair Scott, board members, Superintendent Moore. Data Research and Accountability has been working with Intervention and Advanced Learning Services to evaluate the 2019-22 AIG 3-year plan. We are currently in the closing year of the evaluation. Outcomes of the study will be provided to the board April 2023. Throughout the evaluation, I've been meeting with the AIG team to provide them with formative feedback that informs their work and planning for the next 3-year plan. Today, I'm going to share with you some examples of the formative feedback that I've been sharing with the AIG team throughout the course of the evaluation. The 3-year AIG plan is based on 6 North Carolina program standards. These 6 standards include student identification, comprehensive programming, differentiated curriculum and instruction, personnel and professional development, partnerships, and program accountability. One of the first steps in the evaluation process was working with the AIG team to create a logic model, and the first 2 years of the logic model are shown on this slide. The evaluation is focusing on standards 1 through 4. Next, I'm going to share with you 3 examples of formative feedback that were provided to the AIG team, and these examples are from years 1 and 2 of the evaluation, so which speak to the implementation, short-term, and intermediate goals. In terms of Standard 1, student identification, one of the goals of the AIG plan was to increase the percentage of underrepresented students identified as AIG. To address this goal, Intervention and Advanced Learning Services worked with Student Assignment and Data Research and Accountability to implement the new district nomination local norming process. This new nomination process uses statistics on a wide range of data to examine third grade students who are high-performing students, but who may be getting missed by the traditional screening process. As a result of this process, in 2019-20, 2,025 third grade students were nominated for the AIG program. Of these students, 36.5% were white, 31.6% were Black African American, and 22.2% were Hispanic Latino. These preliminary results are promising in addressing equitable access to AIG services, such that in 2018-19, out of all AIG students identified, only 6.7% were Black African American and 5.5% were Hispanic Latino. Simultaneously, during 2019-20 and 2020-21, Intervention and Advanced Learning Services revised and standardized the school community nomination process in which students, parents, and staff can nominate students for the AIG program. In terms of Standard 2, comprehensive programming, the talent development program was developed. The talent development program is designed for high-performing students who were referred for AIG, but who need further support in developing their areas of gifts and talents. Talent development students are served at the same time as AIG students in their areas of giftedness, math and/or ELA. In 2019-20, the program was deployed to 4th grade and 3rd grade was optional. And in 2020-21, the program was deployed to 5th grade. In 2020-21, AIG teachers responded to a feedback survey regarding their time spent providing direct and indirect services to their talent development students. Despite the pandemic, in 2020-21, approximately 71 to 76% of AIG teachers reported providing the specified amount of direct support as directed by the AIG plan to their 4th and 5th grade talent development students in math and ELA. In terms of Standard 4, personnel and professional development, one of the 2019-20 implementation goals was that AIG teachers receive professional development training on the AIG program and that sessions are well attended. Intervention and Advanced Learning Services have held several professional development sessions throughout the academic year. These included the AIG district meeting, a fall kickoff meeting, regional meetings, et cetera, which provided information on the AIG program and its processes. So approximately 800 school staff, including AIG teachers, regular classroom teachers, and support staff participated in these trainings. Standard 5 of the AIG plan, partnerships, ensures ongoing and meaningful participation of stakeholders in the planning and implementation of the AIG program in order to develop strong partnerships. In part to address Standard 5 and to inform the development of the 2022-25 three-year plan, the district has partnered with the Hanover Research Group. The Hanover Research Group will be conducting a survey to solicit stakeholder perceptions of the AIG program, including staff, parents, and students. And they will also be conducting a year-long comprehensive study with multiple check-ins. So at this time, I'm going to turn it back over to Ms. Sproul Roberts, who will tell you more about this partnership.
Thank you so much, Megan.
Could double check is your microphone on?
Sorry about that. That was my job.
Thank you.
Thanks. As we look forward to the 22-25 plan, as always, we want to ensure our plan is aligned to the 6 program standards you see on the screen. These standards support and guide North Carolina school systems as we develop a comprehensive AIG program to meet the needs of our AIG students. As a part of the development of its plan, WCPS has partnered with Hanover Research Group to help solicit stakeholder perceptions as it relates to the 6 program standards. The results will be used to inform our 22-25 AIG plan and the practices within it. Hanover will also help analyze the following questions. So as we look at peer districts and exemplary practices across the state, what do these policies include in alignment with the North Carolina's AIG program standards? What trends are evidenced across these equitable AIG policies, and what difference or points of differentiation emerge? Hanover Research will develop a secondary benchmarking analysis of existing AIG policies related to the NCAIG program standards across peer and exemplary districts throughout the region by reviewing publicly available resources. Hanover will identify the extent to which policies address equitable and inclusive identification and program accountability metrics. This analysis will outline the policy guidelines, identify trends and similarities or differences among those policies, and to the extent possible, identify any evidence of impact on AIG identification outcomes. This research brief will examine evidence-based practices to support areas of interest or need. The desired outcome is to provide current research to inform AIG programming decisions in the district. Now, Hanover will also look at the 3 questions bulleted on this slide. For the first bullet, what impact, if any, have programs had on academics and/or behavioral outcomes? The research group will perform a student data analysis. In this work, they will identify and analyze the various metrics that determine whether programs meet specified objectives and expectations. The desired outcome is to align data with program goals and expectations to support data-driven decisions for allocating resources to the AIG program. For the second bullet, to what extent do students in the district have equitable access to various forms of AIG programming, Hanover will perform an equitable gap analysis. In this analysis, Hanover will examine gaps in student participation across subgroups in access to the AIG programs. The desired outcome is to understand the extent to which various elements may impact students' access to AIG programming. And for the third and final bullet on the slide, how is the AIG program implemented across the district? The research group will perform a fidelity of implementation survey. The goal of the fidelity of implementation survey is to gather data from staff regarding how the program is being implemented across sites. The desired outcome is to identify differences, if any, in how the program is implemented throughout the district and allow leadership to modify programming as deemed necessary or appropriate. Now, based on the series of mixed methods research studies, Hanover will aid the district in identifying major themes that emerge. The research group will culminate the research sequence with a capstone-style report to synthesize the findings across the AIG program research. This capstone report will identify common contributing factors of success around the AIG program as determined by qualitative, secondary, and survey data collected. So as we move into the final portion of the presentation today, I would like to again thank Dr. Scrimger and the partnership with Data Research and Accountability, as monitoring the effectiveness of the AIG plan for our county is aligned to Program Standard 6. Before we move into discussing the work of the county as done, we will do in preparation for the 22-25 plan, I would like to take a few moments to highlight the work accomplished in our current plan. So during the 1922 AIG plan, we were able to accomplish many things. District nomination local norming process implemented by student assignment for student referrals. Develop guidelines for talent development, starting with grades 4 and 5 and phasing into secondary. Continue to collaborate with the science department to develop K-2 science nurturing project lessons. AIG teachers are collaborating with classroom teachers through various opportunities, such as participating in weekly PLTs meetings and monthly SBCGE meetings. Shifted from testing gateways to a more holistic identification approach by analyzing multiple data points of a student through a portfolio. We created a portfolio process that was not solely focused on formal testing data, began to identify more children in our underrepresented populations, began to train teachers on the importance of using multiple data points in the identification process, professional learning on team-initiated problem-solving process for interpreting data, established university partnerships with NC State and Duke to support both students and teachers, and we began providing professional learning to teachers about the importance of the social and emotional needs of our gifted learners. As we look forward, the AIG Equity Collaborative Team has been monitoring our current plan as well as actively writing the 22-25 AIG plan. This has been an ongoing process since the start of the school year. Thus far, the team has been able to look at the feedback from the state as well as various publications to begin refining our current plan to ensure the plan meets the needs of our gifted learners. The data gathered from our work with Hanover, as well as our participation in a Talent Unleashed project, will all be used to inform our 22-25 plan for WCPSS. This team is comprised of various stakeholders that will continue to meet monthly to deeply analyze our current plan in alignment to the 6 program standards. On the screen, you can see a timeline for writing the plan, including dates to return here to gather input and approval prior to our 22-23 school year. And lastly, the data gathered will not only be used to inform our 22-25 AIG plan, but also to inform the development of a multi-year business case. The data gathered will ensure resources are allocated in areas of need for our gifted students. We will evaluate our current funding allocations, both state and local, and develop a multi-year plan. In this analysis, we will identify what is truly needed to ensure our program meets the needs of all gifted learners. So I just want to say thank you for your engagement today, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to present, and we can address any questions you have at this time.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Cook, Ms. Pearl-Roberts, Dr. Scrimger, for all of the information that you presented to us, which I feel like I'm going to need to go back and watch the presentation a couple of times to synthesize all of the information that was shared. Very important. And before I turn it over to my colleagues for questions, as I asked for special education, did the state budget move the needle for AIG funding?
You know, the second you asked that question, I did some quick research and have not yet been able to find a specific answer, Ms. Scott, not to my knowledge at this time, but that's obviously something that we want to dig into as we're analyzing implications for the budget. I don't anticipate a change to that 4% cap. I don't know about the per pupil number, which I believe has hovered right around that $1,300 to $1,400 per pupil mark. So we can follow up to learn that in the next few days.
Thank you. So 4% cap, and approximately how many students are identified AIG in the Wake County Public School System, percentage?
About 16%. About 16%.
16%. So that's a big difference. All right, well, I will turn it over to my colleagues for questions. Ms. Cash?
So at one time, I mean, I was pretty passionate about AIG in Wake County for years and years, and then one of the past board members and I spoke a lot about it over the last 4 years. But so I have some questions about resourcing what we have already. So when you talk about the 4% cap and 16% identified, and we're identifying more. And after the May and June presentations, I actually heard from some of our AIG teachers, because I think a lot of them have been around here for years, and they don't feel like they have the resources to be able to meet the needs of the already identified students, even though we would like to identify more, for sure. So the fact, and I'm not sure what the price tag is for the Hanover research program is, which you might be able to address, and I don't know that we've added a great deal of staff to our schools to serve the needs of our AIG students, so I have to know how to address that.
Thank you for the question, Ms. Cash, and certainly Lakeisha may jump in and have additional thoughts. So first of all, the gap is evident, right? I mean, that's a topic that, as you just alluded to, we've been in front of this group and we have talked much about, certainly during my tenure in Central Services over the last 5+ years. I think part of the work of what we want to be able to do, particularly with Hanover, is to take a deep look at what our current allocations are, what our processes are in terms of getting those resources out to schools. What that's not going to do, obviously, is make up the entirety of that significant gap that we're talking about in terms of what state level funding is. I think, when Ms. Roberts referenced future business cases, I think part of what we want to look at is if we have the capacity to make up some of that state level funding gap with local dollars, how would we best spend those dollars? So it's almost twofold. It's how are we resourcing now with what we've got, and are there opportunities for us to be more impactful in a positive ways with how those dollars go out? And if we were to increase funding for AIG programming in the district, what would be the areas where we would have the most positive impact? And I think that's part of the work that we're talking about. So I don't think there's any question that there's work to be done in that area. And one of the decisions that we'll have to make in the future is how much of that work can we afford to make up locally, and what does that look like? Knowing that every dollar counts. I think that's the first thing that we really want to take a deep look at is the money that we do have, the resources and the staffing that we do have. Are we organized to be as effective and efficient as we possibly can be, even if we, I think, all acknowledge and recognize it probably should be more and may be at some point in the future?
So what do
and I'll let Lakeisha, I think.
Oh, I'm
Lakeisha
sorry,
may
go
want to
ahead.
Yeah, and I think that's a very good point, right? So we want to be very sensitive to our teachers and making sure that our teachers have what they need in order to meet our students' needs. So as we are talking about increasing the level of identification and making the process more equitable, one of the things we do a great job at is keeping a pulse as to how many identified or talent developed students are within each building. So when we're looking at our current allotment formula, we're making sure that we are not going over that allotment criteria, and we're making sure that we're working individually with each school because we know each school has different needs. So as of now, based on this increased awareness to identifying equitably, we have not increased any school beyond their allotment formula.
But their allotment formula was already too low. I mean, I'm trying to figure out how to keep the third, fourth, and fifth graders that feel like their AIG needs might not be met. We've still got like fourth and fifth graders right now that I would like to keep in Wake County, and the teachers helping them meet their needs. And I'm not sure we will be addressing that very soon, probably, I guess.
So I will just say a couple things. Despite yearly requests to the legislature to take a look at this, there's not been a lot of movement, but I think that advocacy needs to continue. The capping the amount or increasing the amount per student, both of those are needed. Removing the cap and then increasing the amount per student, both of those. But just for us, the biggest impact would be removing the cap. I do think that we look for and have made some changes in the last couple of years, a lot more than that, quite frankly, around instructional resources that can be scaffolded to multiple types of groups in terms of abilities, so that we're providing teachers with those resources as a part of even core instruction in the classroom. But that makes the delivery of services for students beyond even just those that are identified as the AIG teacher in a school, to also what happens with the teacher who's doing core content, English, language arts, math instruction, and so forth. The work that's being done to, the very last slide was really looking at, and we've talked about this previously, how do we then develop some sort of priority or multi-year function with local dollars, and then where would we use those dollars? Despite the requests for the state to look at the formulas, there have been no changes there. I think it is incumbent on us at this point to look at what local dollars we would need, make it be part of a multi-year plan, determine what the best use of those are, and we're going to have to really get the review of what we're doing now is also really important in terms of how Hanover is helping us with that, because we need to use our existing dollars in the best way possible. And right now, I think we're trying to serve multiple groups of students through that. And I think we had a grant a few years ago to try to do early identification and the programs to try to the nurturing program, and that was done through a grant. But there were some schools that wanted to continue that. So if you want to, and AIG funds are not designed to serve K-2 students. Those state funds are 3-5 students. So when a school wants to serve students that are K-2, they have to find a way to do that either within their existing AIG services or their teacher allotments, their classroom teacher allotments. We have a lot of pressures, and not a lot of sources for funding to do it, which is why the notion that came up in the last year of adding it to a multi-year strategy is the best option that we're going to have as a district to apply local dollars towards it, because they're not coming from the state or other revenue sources. So it'll have to be a local business case.
Does that kind of address your concerns, Ms. Cash? I mean, I have not been on the board with you for 5 years. I've only been on the board with you for 3. And I'm deeply passionate about serving our AIG students, because I want Wake County Public Schools, like we all do, to be the best place for every child in Wake County to attend school. So I just want to make sure, if that's not your question, if you could rephrase it again so I can get it down to really make sure that we understand.
It was my question, but I don't think there's obviously going to be an answer for our current 3, 4, and 5 students to have more services. But I just wanted to see if we had opportunities to give more services for the identified students that we have.
Okay, I appreciate that. Ms. Kushner?
Thank you, Ms. Scott. And whenever we talk about AIG, I'm reminded of that paradox I've heard a very wise friend say, that it's as though we need more identification of AIG and less identification, and have AIG spread throughout the district as a way of teaching our students and really tapping into the gifts of all our students. But I know we're talking about academically and intellectually gifted students here. And so how can we impact, if we're not getting the evaluation from Hanover till 2023, how are we going to be able to impact this next plan?
Yes, ma'am. Just to clarify, and Megan, you can speak further, but so the district does an ongoing analysis of multiple projects in alignment with Policy 3140. I believe this is one of, Megan, maybe 10 or 12 projects that Data Research and Accountability just works every year on a rolling basis. And so I think when Megan referenced 2023, that's the internal formal report that would be presented to the board. A lot of the findings and the formative work, though, Ms. Kushner, they were referencing is information and data that's already being shared with our team and with the district as we speak. So even though we haven't quite finished the 3-year plan, we're in the midst of year 3, we're already using that internal data and information and analysis to inform decision-making for 22-25's plan. And we also anticipate receiving the information from Hanover, which is kind of a separate lane, this spring. So that will actually be provided to us in the spring of 22 in time to fully incorporate their feedback and all the data and information we're talking about into the future plan.
Okay, and I would hope that it's not just about funding, that it's going to be about strategies and ways of reaching students throughout the district, and you know, again, that balance of excellent core instruction with differentiation, which is the Holy Grail. So you have, again, another paradox of solid core and differentiation. So how can, but y'all are so gifted, you're going to be able to figure all that out. But I think that, but truly, I think if we have a diverse curriculum, that should be the spotlight we always turn to make sure that parents know that and families know that this is where their children are going to get the education they need. And I am excited to see the work to look at fidelity across the district and make sure that we're reaching all students, so that students in all of our schools are going to have access. Because I know Ms. Cash has brought to my attention, you know, a perception at one school in District 6 that didn't have attention to AIG students the way another school did. And so we don't want to have those inequities across the district. So I was glad to see that in the presentation. Thank you very much. So Ms. Sproul-Roberts, I think that was it's something hopeful to look for. So thank you.
And Ms. Kushner, first of all, thank you for highlighting what you just referenced. And I want to be very, very clear. We're well aware of funding gaps and formula issues, whether we're talking about AIG programming or many other programmatic areas in terms of state-level funding. That challenge notwithstanding, I can assure you the attitude of our team, of our staff, of our teachers in our schools is we're going to find a way to do this anyway. Right. Irrespective of what some of those funding gaps might be. And I think you referenced one of the biggest components of this from a standpoint of core instruction, and Superintendent Moore referenced it as well, is to make sure we have a long-term comprehensive strategy for the procurement and implementation of quality, rigorous core curriculum that is relevant and engaging for our students. And we know one of the primary barriers in terms of identifying giftedness at a really young age very often can be just, you know, the disguise that is created by a lack of engagement or interest in the curricula that students are exposed to. And I can't tell you how important something like EL education and that multi-grade level literacy curriculum and the engagement that can create for students who maybe in the past would not have found interest, would maybe have not even been given the opportunity to go much deeper into what otherwise is a really abstract concept, but it gets brought to life because they've all of a sudden read a story that's relevant and engaging to them and causes them to have an interest that dives deeper into their own learning, right? So those are things that, yes, money is critically important. We have to be able to provide resources to our students. We have to provide those to our AIG students, just like we do all other demographic groups of kids. But I want to just be very, very clear, those kind of outside of our control, at least the local level, kind of challenges that we face, our attitude is we have to figure out a way to do this anyway. And honestly, I think, Dr. McFarland referenced earlier, that's one of the reasons why we feel like the timing right now, on the heels of, hopefully, as we're exiting a multi-year pandemic, we feel like the timing is perfect for us to kind of take this look under the hood. In this case, AIG programming. A few minutes ago, we were talking about special education services, so that irrespective of what additional resources we might be able to procure in the future, whether it's state dollars or local dollars or other funding sources, we want to make sure that what we're doing with what we've got elicits the most positive impact that it possibly can. So I just wanted to make note of that, and thank you for bringing that topic up.
And I think we as a board need to stay focused on getting more adults in the building to support this work. I mean, the staffing pressures we are feeling are real. They're certainly real at the school level, and we have to stay focused on to get services to students, making sure that we get more instructional assistants and other adults in the building to help our educators every day. So thank you all for bringing all this before to us.
It is a heck of a snowball that we have when we don't have enough adults in the building, when the state does not increase allotments, when the state does nothing to address grades 4 through 12, when the state does nothing to offer more IAs. And it is meaningful when we look at excellent curriculum and maybe some of the details that, people are still, when it comes to EL, they may agree or disagree with it. But when you look at the concept of that, to be able to work into groups, to see the agency and the ownership that students have when they're diving into that, and being able to, and that's exactly what we want. We want a curriculum to naturally offer students the opportunity to understand those basic standards, because it meets the standards that are required by the state. We want them to be able to take it to that level 4 and understand how and why. And it does that, but to do it with even greater fidelity, we need more people guiding children, being there, having those meaningful conversations. And in a class of 35 10-year-olds, that's a little hard to do. So I had to.
I think Ms. Scott and I could set each other off in rants, but
it's very meaningful.
It's very real.
And that's, I hope we can continue to advocate for that, and I hope our friends in the General Assembly will hear our pleas to them.
Well, and just like with special education, we, all, being in a diverse, integrated classrooms, the greater inclusion we have for students with IEPs, the more students are learning together, the better off we're all going to be. And I think that's also the critical difference in public education. All students are welcome and included. And I think that's something to hang our hat on as well. Thank you.
Absolutely. And as we allow more volunteers in our classroom, if folks want to go through the background checks and volunteer and come take a look and see what's really happening in these classrooms that they talk so much about that they've never been in, I would encourage them to take a look. So I didn't mean to go off on that. I'm so sorry. Ms. Carter.
All right, thank you. I didn't have just one question really quick. I do appreciate this overview as well. And I'll just have to say, looking at the multi data points as well in the portfolios. And I just think that's important. So many of our students, I know you hit on it, Mr. Cook, sometimes in the classroom, there might be a behavior issue, and it's directly related to the engagement level is directly linked to the level of what's being asked of that student, and some just check out. So I thank you for that acknowledgement. And I just kind of a little bit along what Ms. Kushner's question was about the, and I know you talked about how you're using the evaluation information ongoing of this project and 3-year plan internally to make adjustments as needed, which is great. I was just wondering if any of that information would be shared when the Hanover information is shared in the spring of 2020, just so kind of have a more comprehensive, I know not the final plan or the final report, but could pieces of that be shared at the same time as we're looking at moving forward with another plan?
I think that's a great question, and I don't want to speak too much for Megan, but I think it's reasonable to presume that as part of our follow-up, for example, with whether it's this committee or a work session, that we share the findings of not just what Hanover has provided to us, but also, I think to your point, maybe a little bit more detail in terms of some of the formative information that data research and accountability is providing. So my answer would be yes, absolutely.
All right, thank you. And then just circling back, just want to say thanks for including students, because I had that down. Y'all did that for the Hanover research, so I appreciate that. Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Carter. The standards for the North Carolina standards for AIG, it looks like that was updated in 2018. Did they have a timeline as other grade level standards or subject standards change? Does that have a, every 5 years or every 10 years? Or are those standards addressed by the state? Do you know?
Specifically of the program standards for AIG?
Yes, those
So they
six.
were actually just updated this past year with some modifications to language, but the basic structure of them are the same.
Okay, I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
On the presentation, the the picture was a little small of the standards. And I'm not sure if any of our online colleagues have any questions or comments. It does not appear that they do. One of the last things that I will just ask for consideration is, as we continue to have discussions with our stakeholder groups and our parents of AIG students or talent development students, and really trying to capture their expectations of the program, their expectations of what their child's daily school schedule would look like to them, what they see their students accessing during their school day. And I imagine that would be a little different for K-5 and middle school versus high school, because usually at the high school level they have the option to take AP courses and other courses like that. And really trying to get a better understanding of that. Sometimes I'm a little surprised when I hear what folks say about AIG courses and how those are designed. So I'd love to have a more comprehensive understanding of what our parents and our caregivers for AIG students are expecting.
We appreciate that feedback, Ms. Scott, and certainly when we do come back, I think that'll be another area that we can provide some additional information on, and also just think about in terms of, to your point, our communications on just an ongoing basis with families and communities in terms of what they can expect in terms of those direct services.
I appreciate that. It looks like that. We don't have any additional questions or comments. I greatly appreciate my colleagues being here in person and online. Very good feedback, very good questions of this important core work that we have when we're looking at the individual needs of our students, because we have 160,000. I think Superintendent Moore has said this before. We have 160,000 individual students, and we want each of those students to feel that their individual needs are being met. So I appreciate the work and the update on everything. So thank you so much for your work, for being here. Before we get ready to adjourn, I'll just let you know that we have December off. from Student Achievement Committee, and we'll see you again January 24th. Back here in person. I hope everyone has a great and safe holiday weekend, and we'll see you in January. So we'll go ahead and adjourn this meeting tonight at 4:55. Thank you again to our staff for setting up our hybrid meeting as well. We appreciate all the work from everyone here. Thank you so much.